Hey everybody, Evan Laux here for Motorcycle and Powersports News. We're at the Crawford Museum and we're looking at this 1953 Triumph Trophy. It's your Ride of the Week. So guys, I'm here with John Lutsch. He's going to tell us all about this really cool flat track bike. And John, where do you want to start with this bike? Because there's a lot of interesting aspects of this particular bike right here.
Well, the first part, let's go with the scary part. No brakes.
Okay, right.
Which would keep me off the thing right from the get-go. Flat tracking, as you know, is a pretty popular racing sport that continues right on till today. A lot of people are taking older bikes that they salvage basically and turning them into flat trackers. And there's also a very big vintage flat tracking racing program going on in the States too. This one is an early Triumph. It has a separate gearbox, and the later ones, like you'll see maybe on a 1967 Daytona, this is called a pre-unit, but it's when they both come together is in the 1960s roughly. So this really precedes that by quite some time. But as far as a race bike, it does have a clutch and a transmission, obviously with 4 speeds, but that's all it has. You know, if you want to stop, you either crash, you drag your feet, or you downshift.
Right.
Those are your options. Probably all 3 go together, you know.
Right.
But you'll notice some interesting things about it. Number one, it's a hardtail, so you have no suspension, but you've got gigantic seat springs, which try to mitigate some of that shock.
Right.
You'll see that it's a 2-cylinder, but both exhausts are routed to the right-hand side, and it's because in the race you're counterclockwise in your turns. Mm-hmm. So you want to keep all the stuff, the draggy bits, up high or away from the low side of the bike. So that's why they routed them that way. And you can also see the foot pegs are pretty elevated compared to like a street bike would be, just to keep everything as high up off the ground as you can when you're leaning the bike over. One of the things that you probably can't see from the camera angle at the moment is that this particular bike has an option which is a hand grip that's been attached to the left side triple trees or the forks. And that is so that when you're going into your left-hand turn and you're counter steering, if you want to make the bike more aerodynamic, you grab that handle and you just get yourself down into an aerodynamic tuck and pray.
Right.
You know. But so that's kind of the unique things about this particular motorcycle.
And not really relevant to this bike, but we were talking some flat track racers, they're even crazier, they'll just grab the fork.
Oh yeah, that's what they do today. If they don't have that handle, they'll just reach right up and you know, get down into that aerodynamic tuck and they'll grab right onto the front fork. This actually wasn't a flat tracker, but remember in Happy Days, Fonzie?
Yeah.
53 Triumph Trophy.
Okay.
That was his bike. So.
Is that what he jumped the shark with?
Yeah, that was it.
I haven't seen much of Happy Days, but I'll have to rewatch. You got the 500cc motor here. It's a little smaller than, am I correct in saying that's a little smaller than some of the other bikes you'd see on a flat track back then?
Probably pretty average. I mean, some of the Harleys got bigger, obviously, and still continue to run bigger displacement bikes, but 500 cc's was pretty average.
Okay, and how did it compete with those other brand bikes?
Pretty well, because, you know, as you can see, this thing is really stripped down. I mean, basically every bit of additional weight has been pulled off the bike. So you wouldn't know that unless you wheel it around, and it's substantially lighter than like a road bike would be. So right. You get a lot more efficiency with the power that's put to the ground.
As far as the engine goes, were they built in any, you know, sort of way to make flat track racing easier or more efficient? I
don't think so. I think that it was just pretty much a stock motor. Yeah, I mean, everybody had their, you know, the way that they would grind the valves and things like that to try to get a little more boost out of them, but I don't think that there was anything super substantial done in terms of reconfiguring the engine for flat tracking in particular.
Okay. Is there anything else, you know, we forgot to hit about this bike in particular?
I don't think so. I mean, it's a pretty simple machine, but in that simplicity, there's a real elegance. You know, the bike is really pared down to its absolute essentials, and it really is quite form-following function.
As far as flat track racing goes, it's almost more about the rider than it is the bike.
Well, yeah, you got to be really skilled
Yeah.
in order to compete. And then, but the interesting thing is that there's guys who are in their late 50s and early 60s that are still very competitive flat track racers today. So you're right, it's all about the skill, it's not necessarily about the bike.
Right. And obviously you got to be a pretty confident rider. That's probably not something I would try and do.
Me
I don't know about you, John.
No way.
Well, John, thanks for telling us about this 1953 Triumph. It's a really pretty bike, and we're glad we got to hear about it.
Yeah, thanks for coming to see it. Appreciate it.
Of course. Guys, if you're ever in Northeast Ohio, make sure you're checking out the Crawford Museum. John here, if you're lucky enough to see him, he'll tell you about any bike here, so it'll always be a good trip. And make sure you're checking out Motorcycle Powersports News for more great content, and you can follow us on our social media accounts and our website and our YouTube page. Thanks for watching, guys.
Thanks.